the voters' role in the abortion issue. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Herb Asher, OSU political scientist, Jesse Balmert, State House reporter for the Cincinnati Enquirer, and Mike Gonidakis, Republican strategist. A week past the dramatic leak of a draft Supreme Court ruling that would overturn Roe versus Wade, activists on both sides of the issue are mobilizing. Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost promises to move quickly to enforce the heartbeat law if the court overturns Roe. That law would ban abortion after the detection of cardiac activity is on hold right now. On the other side, 4 women state lawmakers are drafting a proposed amendment to the Ohio Constitution that would guarantee a woman's right to an abortion as well as any form of contraception. Such a move likely would require a lengthy and costly effort to collect signatures and win voter approval. And Ohioans seem to support abortion rights. A Quinnipiac poll from 2019 found that 61% support Roe, while 32% oppose it. Mike Gonidakis, if the court overturns Roe, and you see that only 30 to 32% of Ohioans and Americans support doing away with Roe, how does your group, Ohio Right to Life, and other abortion rights opponents move forward?
Well, we would welcome this debate in the public square, Mike, and we would love it to go to the ballot because that ballot initiative that you just spoke of would allow for an abortion up to and through the 9th month. There's no restrictions in that, in their proposal, what they're doing right now.
They haven't said that. They said they would mimic what Roe, they haven't drafted it, but they're saying it would be viability standards the same as what Roe is now.
Well, no, respectfully, what Roe says is states can limit abortion after viability. But what Roe said is a woman can have an abortion up to and through the 9th month. That's what will be on the ballot. We will win 70-30 on that. So we welcome that argument because what they won't do is put any restrictions in there because Planned Parenthood doesn't want any restrictions. So that ballot initiative that they're talking about would be full abortion on demand through the 9th month of pregnancy.
Herb Asher, what does this do to this decision?
I don't quite agree that they're that stupid to make it that sweeping. But you now have the question, will the heartbeat bill be sufficient for members of the General Assembly? And if you look in Ohio and you look nationally, there are so many proposals for the post-Roe versus Wade era, including some that say no abortions whatsoever, no exemptions for rape, incest, or the health of the mother, criminal penalties for women who get an abortion and doctors who perform one. So the question would be, if Roe versus Wade is in fact repealed or overturned, will we be simply having the heartbeat bill as the operative bill, or will you have members of the General Assembly? And I think you'd have a better sense of that.
Well, Jesse, let's ask you. There was debate over the trigger bill that was happening before this leak came out. There was a hearing on it. Where do we stand on that in the State House? The heartbeat bill has been passed. It's just on hold right now. There's a stay in the federal courts. But the trigger bill that would make abortion illegal as soon as Roe is overturned, has that been stalled right now? Is it on a holding pattern?
No, I think it's moving forward. There's a House version and a Senate version. I think what we're looking at is just timeline here. So the heartbeat bill, which would ban abortion as early as about 6 weeks into pregnancy, would potentially take effect pretty immediately after a decision from the U.S. Supreme Court, whereas these trigger bans, which would be triggered by a U.S. Supreme Court decision, Republicans are not going to have enough votes to have this take effect right away. And so most bills take effect 90 days after they're, signed by the governor, et cetera. And so you could find yourself in a situation where Ohio has a 6-week ban for a period of months and then a total ban after that.
Mike Gonidakis, why not wait until the ruling comes out? Even if right now it's probably 5-6 weeks away at the latest, we're going to have a ruling. We'll know for sure if this draft opinion is the actual opinion of the court. We'll know if it's anywhere in between there. Shouldn't lawmakers just wait to see what the decision is? The heartbeat bill is there, wait and see what it is, and then draft legislation after that?
Well, the legislation is drafted, the Ohio Right to Life trigger bill. Mike says we're going to put this law on the books until Roe's overturned. So it doesn't matter if Roe's or if the decision comes out 1 day, 5 days, or 5 weeks from now. We can pass this law, and it may never go into effect because if the court rules, which I don't think it will, that Roe stands, then it would never go into effect. But why not pass it now and be ready from a pro-life perspective, of course?
Herb Asher, what does this do to this debate if it does go to the legislature, does go possibly to the voters at some point, how does it change?
Well, first of all, it heightens the issue. It makes it more salient. It becomes real. It hasn't been real for a lot of people particularly on the pro-choice side. I don't think they ever really saw this day coming so quickly, but it does change. I mean, it partly depends upon how the Republicans respond to this. And again, if they really go to the most extreme version of a trigger bill that really penalizes women and doctors and things like that, that actually has some political consequences that probably help the Democrats among quote-unquote suburban women. If they let the decision unfold, and then if the heartbeat bill takes effect or whatever, and they don't do anything else this year, they will not further heighten the tensions, and then we'll be living with an abortion ban, but not abortion totally abolished.
So, Mike, should you be a total ban with no exceptions for rape or incest, no exceptions for the health of the mother? Is that what Ohio Right to Life is pushing for?
No, certainly not. We absolutely believe that to save the life of the mother is paramount, and there should always be an exception.
But no exception for rape or incest?
No, we believe all life is valuable, whether you're male, female, black, white, gay, or straight. You have the inherent right to live your life, regardless of how you come into this world. The trigger bill does not penalize birth mothers. It obviously holds doctors to a standard that they can't perform a procedure that's illegal.
Why not hold the women responsible?
In the 45 years Ohio Right to Life existed, we've never supported legislation that would do that. That's the wrong thing to do.
But if you believe that abortion is murder and the woman chooses to have an abortion, is she not complicit under your thinking?
Absolutely not.
It's not a political decision to keep the women out
Absolutely
of it.
not.
Jesse, the lawmakers, are they, this is a very conservative legislature. Are they eager to have this ruling, or is there a bit of dread that they don't know what it means for them down the road? Looking at Governor DeWine, we'll talk about that campaign in a moment, but is there a little bit of uncertainty there?
Well, I think when you talk about Governor DeWine, this is maybe his most consistent issue across his political career. I mean, I think people can try to run to the right of him on firearms, for example, but this has always been an issue. Like, he signed, for example, the heartbeat bill that we were talking about when his predecessor was not interested in that. And so I think Republicans are willing to have this conversation. I think they have a supermajority in both the House and the Senate, and so they certainly have the votes to pass this legislation. But again, because of the number of Democrats, they're not going to have this take effect right away. I do think whether or not this is a ballot initiative, it is going to be a topic of conversation in the coming elections. But I think both the right and the left could be energized by that. I think there is a lot of talk about how Democrats can use this issue, but I think Republicans have consistently used this issue.
Yeah, I think Republicans do not want some of their more extreme members to be talking about, I don't like the heartbeat bill, it doesn't go far enough. I want to introduce some legislation prior to the election. It won't go anywhere before the election, but that will certainly energize the Democrats saying, oh my goodness, the heartbeat bill we don't like, but in fact, now they're talking about a total ban. And look, you look around the country and these things sort of disseminate across the state boundaries or whatever. So I think the Republicans would rather keep this, let the court make its decision. Let's have, we have a piece of legislation in effect, but you've got some members of the General Assembly who are to the right of the right of the right.
Mike, is that good enough for Ohio Right to Life and folks like yourself who want a more total ban?
Well, no, our goal, our mission statement is to protect innocent human life from conception to natural death, and we're going to advocate for that, whether the court rules in our favor or not. We work hard to elect good pro-life men and women in the legislature and the governor's office, and we want to work with them.
Does it mobilize conservatives as much as it did when Roe was on the books and what they were overturning was not foreseen or not in the near future?
I believe so. God, guns, and babies. They always say in Republican primaries, right? These issues.
Primary, but I mean in general.
Yeah, but in the general too. That's if you want to run statewide or locally, and as a Republican, you need to be right on those issues.
Herb, abortion. If you ask voters what's most important on their list of issues, abortion doesn't rank very high, at least before Roe, before this decision. Does that change?
It could go up a little higher, but it's not going to be the most salient issue. It won't be number two, but it certainly can move a certain number of voters. And again, if in fact you had, let's say, a bill that would propose no exceptions for rape and incest, when you look at the polling on that, many people think that's so harsh on women. And especially when you talk about the case of a 13-year-old girl who has been a victim of incest and is now pregnant. And no matter how much you say, but that she's carrying a life, and that life deserves to come to term. Most people say, wait a second, that's too harsh. And so that could energize people.
I had a Nikki Antonio, state senator, on, one of the 4 women who's sponsoring this proposed amendment. I asked her on our podcast this week, is there any room for compromise? You look at Europe, and they have abortion bans after, say, 12 weeks, after 14 weeks. Is there any room where this could be settled with politically between the abortion rights supporters and abortion rights opponents, do you think, Mike? Or is it just all or nothing for you folks?
I don't believe there's room for compromise, because what Planned Parenthood wants is access to abortion up to and through the 9th month of pregnancy. We oppose that, and we won't do it. So there is no middle ground on this.
Okay, let's get to our next topic. The fight between the Ohio Redistricting Commission and the Ohio Supreme Court could be coming to a head this week. The court ordered the commission to explain why it should not be held in contempt for resubmitting a previously rejected state legislative district map. Republican members of the commission responded they should not be held in contempt because they are complying with the federal court, which says it is ready to approve that third map. And Republican commissioners say holding them in contempt would violate the separation of powers doctrine. Democrats on the commission, as well as fair district advocates, call on the Supreme Court to issue those contempt charges. Jesse Balmert, where do we stand on this right now? We're waiting to see if the court will take that extra step, issue contempt charges.
Yeah, it's actually a place we've been before. So there have been, I think this is the 3rd attempt to hold the Ohio Redistricting Commission, or at least some of its members, in contempt of court. Once was because they didn't turn in the map on time. This time is because they turned in the same map that had previously been submitted and that the Ohio Supreme Court has already ruled is unconstitutional. But as you said, at least 2 of the 3 judges on this federal panel say, this is the best we're going to do given the circumstances. And so it'll be interesting whether the Ohio Supreme Court takes that next step. They have not previously. I also think there would just be political blowback on the court if they were to take that step. So we'll see what happens.
Political blowback, Mike Gonidakis. Maureen O'Connor is a swing vote. She basically will decide whether or not to do this, we think. She's not running for re-election. Her term is up at the end of the year. Politically, she doesn't seem to have anything to lose. Why not go to the mat on this?
Well, as a lawyer, I want to be careful in my comments here because I don't want to get in trouble by Maureen or the court, of course. But from a political perspective, I'm not a member of the General Assembly, but you've heard the words, the I word, impeachment. Does that retribution if someone's held in contempt? I don't know. We don't need to do any of this. As Jesse said, they've tried this multiple times, and the court has said no on contempt charges. Look, we have a May 28th date. If they don't get a map, we'll have a map according to the federal court. Let's just move on and have an election.
Herb, the argument is that if the judicial branch files contempt charges against the legislative and executive branches, that crosses the line, separation of powers. But yet you have the executive branch and the legislative branch openly defying the third branch of government. So who's right here?
Well, I think actually Maureen O'Connor and the courts are correct, but is in fact a contempt ruling the appropriate response. And I use the word contempt in a little different way and make this a more political statement, that in fact the Republican members of the Redistricting Commission have demonstrated contempt for the will of the people of Ohio and for the constitutional amendments that have been, that were passed by them. And so they all along have been saying, we're not going to follow this. They submitted plans that they admitted at the very outset were not going to pass muster. So I look at this and say, okay, the Democrats, if you want to really talk about this, you'll make it a political issue and say that, in fact, the Republican members, some of whom are on the ballot in November, failed the voters, failed the citizens of Ohio.
Jesse, it's not a guarantee, absolute guarantee, this federal court. They've indicated they're going to take the third map, but they haven't ruled yet. Is there any thinking at the Supreme Court or in the legislature that there's a chance this might get pushed out a little bit further?
Well, I think you never know until you actually know, until you actually have the decision in front of you. So I'm not going to guess what this 3-judge panel is going to do, but they set this particular date because they said this is the last possible moment to pick a map, and this is the last possible map that we can pick in order to hold a primary on August 2nd, and the August 2nd primary is necessary to hold a general election on November 2nd. So, like, just timeline-wise, I think it's very likely that they're going to impose these third maps. I don't know if the federal judges have any thoughts about the fact that the Ohio Redistricting Commission essentially did nothing to try to draft a new map, given 22 days to do so. We'll see if they have any commentary on that.
Do we have to have an election on August 2nd? I looked at the Secretary of State's office. It says possible. So even he's not completely sure. Why can't it be August 9th? Or September?
Maybe it could be.
September 6th?
Well, during the court hearings, which I was at, the Secretary of State's office said for the 88 county boards of elections, because it's a bottom-up state, that they need this runway of time to be prepared, and most of them have
For the August 2nd
for the
date.
August 2nd date.
Yeah.
So that I don't want to speak on behalf of LaRose, but his office said that's what the 88 county boards of elections are telling him, the bipartisan boards.
You do wonder, and you made this point, that the three-judge federal panel basically said, use the time available, go back to work. And again, the Redistricting Commission basically said to the three-judge federal panel, well, we're not doing anything. We're just going to sit here and let the clock run out.
Yeah, but they also said if you don't do anything, we'll take this map. So kind of a reverse incentive.
Yeah, but I wonder. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But I wonder if any. I don't think they'll change anything. But I think they could be annoyed. They were trying to be constructive, and
A lot of annoyed people in this whole process. Candidates who survived last week's primary are now focused on November's general election. Governor DeWine will try to heal divisions in his party and win back rural voters who supported his primary rivals. Former Dayton Mayor Nan Whaley looks to boost her name ID, raise money, and convince voters to reject DeWine after one term. In the race for U.S. Senate, J.D. Vance will have to defend claims that he's been away from Ohio for too long. Tim Ryan will have to counter claims that he's been in Ohio politics for too long. And there are races for Ohio Supreme Court and Congress and state legislature. Herb Asher, is it worse to be a carpetbagger or is it worse to be a lifelong politician? And do voters really care?
well, they do care, and it really depends on the campaign and how skillfully you can make that message apply. So in Tim Ryan's case, they'll call him a lifelong politician, and he'll respond, I've been a lifelong fighter for the working class and the middle class. And it's credible for him to say that, and it's factually accurate to say he's been in politics for a long time. It's factually accurate to say, that J.D. Vance is not exactly a long-term Ohioan, but, and it'll be up to the Democrats to say, well, what is it about him that makes you believe, or that people would believe he's not really one of us or whatever. So carpetbagger oftentimes works, but again, you have to demonstrate that.
Looking back through history, U.S. Senate voters tend not to care about carpetbaggers. I'm thinking of Mitt Romney, who's now in Utah, grew up in Michigan, served in Massachusetts. Hillary Clinton won Senate seat in New York. Go all the way back to Robert Kennedy winning a Senate seat in New York. Carpetbagger doesn't seem to, if you got a good candidate, does it really matter, Jesse?
Yeah, well, it'll actually be interesting to have both J.D. Vance and Mike DeWine on the same Republican ticket, because if you're trying to make the argument that J.D. Vance, hasn't been here long enough, and then you have to make the argument that Mike DeWine has been here for quite some time, but that's a good thing. So it cuts both ways.
Yeah. If you attack Tim Ryan for being a lifelong politician, then what do you say about Mike DeWine? He's been an eternal politician or whatever. I mean.
Tim Ryan, Mike Onondaga seemed to brush off the label of a Trump Democrat. He seems to kind of, I wouldn't say he's embracing Trump, but he's embracing some of the Trump's attitude when it comes to economic issues. Is that wise for him?
Well, it doesn't work because he's a sitting member of Congress. So when he puts out these YouTube videos saying Congress needs to do X and Y, people are like, well, you're in Congress. Why aren't you doing it? Where's the legislation? Introduce it. Do something, right? You're a sitting member of Congress. He's not doing it. But Mike, I'm old enough to remember when I started at Ohio Right to Life in 2008, I endorsed Tim Ryan because he used to be pro-life. Tim Ryan used to be 100% pro-life. Now he claims to be 100% pro-choice. So he's got a lot of things to answer to voters, especially hardcore Democrat voters.
Yeah. But people running as incumbents or members of Congress running against the Congress is actually a very common thing, and oftentimes it works. You can say, I've been there, I see what the dysfunctions are.
He ran, he challenged Nancy Pelosi, so it's going to be harder to, would it be harder to link him to Nancy Pelosi because of that, Mike? Or voters have forgotten it already?
I think voters have forgotten it, Mike. Forgotten what happened 2 weeks ago, so
yeah.
It's in the past.
Governor's race, kind of quiet week after the primary. I guess the campaigns are reorganizing and trying to boost their fundraising, Jesse.
Yeah, it's always a good idea after you spend a lot of money to get a little bit more. So, yeah, I think we go into this with incumbent governors with long name recognition and political experience having the edge in this race. And Nan Whaley is going to try to say to voters that they need someone new. So this whole race will be DeWine's record, whether you're for it or you're against it.
If Mike Gonidakis, if Mike DeWine were to pick one issue to run on, what would it be?
Jobs. Intel, the big Intel announcement, he can continue to spike the football, and he should do that for the leadership he provided on that, and where we were and where we are today. Low unemployment numbers, he's doing a great job.
Herb, Nan Whaley, if you were to pick one issue, what would it be to run on?
I think she would really talk about the need for change because we really have had Republican leadership that has been, and then she'll list some issues here, including she'll talk about redistricting, but she won't make that number one. She'll talk about abortion, but she doesn't want to make that number one either because what Nan Whaley needs to do is to really pick up some voters who don't like Mike DeWine, but they tend to be more conservative than Mike DeWine. So if she runs to the left, she'll scare them back into voting for Mike DeWine. But I think there are ways that she can make the point, look, you're frustrated with him, I'm frustrated with him. We don't always agree on issues, but I think we can agree that it's time for a change. But then she has to flesh that in as to why it's time for a change.
That's a tough road to travel.
Yeah.
Our last topic, legal recreational marijuana will not be on the November ballot. After supporters collected a first set of signatures, lawmakers have had nearly 4 months to pass the proposal as written. It looked like lawmakers were going to say no, and supporters say they were ready to collect more signatures to get it on the fall ballot. But there was a dispute over the signature deadline, and now supporters of the proposal and lawmakers have agreed to settle that lawsuit and wait until 2023. Jesse Balmert, you wrote about this on Friday. Bit of a surprise. What happened?
So there was this lawsuit that was an open question about how it was going to be resolved. We're also getting closer to when a large number of signatures needed to be collected. So I think it was increasingly unlikely that this was going to be on the 2022 ballot. But now we officially know the answer. And having it in 2023, the opportunity for the Ohio General Assembly to pick this up, which they're unlikely to do, I think completely unlikely to do, and then whether that would go onto the ballot in 2023.
What does it do, Herb, for the chances of this passage if it's in an odd year election, a municipal election year?
Yeah, it'll be a low turnout year. I don't think it helps it. If you think that there's going to be, for example, an age difference in terms of support for this, if you think there's going to be a political difference, partisan difference or whatever, I think they're stronger probably in an even year.
Is this a signal, Mike? This was just speculation on my part. When medical marijuana looked like it was going to get on the ballot, looked like it was going to win, the legislature did their own thing. Mm-hmm. Is this a way for the legislature to say, okay, recreational marijuana is coming, let's get ahead of it and let's work out a compromise with these folks?
Well, both of my friends, Speaker Bob Cupp and Senate President Matt Huffman, both have said publicly to the media gaggles in the respective chambers, heck no, we are not passing legalized recreational marijuana in my chamber and the vice versa in the other chamber, so they're not going to do it as long as they're in charge, of course. What we may see happen is, if we do have a ballot initiative, Mike, I welcome it because I believe it'll get struck down. I think the voters of Ohio will not want more drugs. We need less drugs. We just found out we broke fentanyl record deaths in the state and country. Do we need more drugs in Ohio?
The concern would be if this group comes back again and again, do they ultimately win, just as the casino people ultimately won after many defeats? And in hindsight, you would say, well, if we had negotiated something, the state could have gotten a much better deal. But drugs are different than the casinos. Yeah. But I think that's the concern. So if they ever think that there's a real chance that it would pass, then I think the legislature might say, okay, let's make this as palatable as possible. But I think right now they don't think it could pass.
And if my memory serves me, the casino issue finally passed in an odd year election. Wasn't it 2015 or 2013? There were so many of them. I forget what it was, an odd-year election.
Yeah. And it was, they made it an economic development issue.
All right, it's time now for our off-the-record parting shots. Mike Gonadakis, you're up first.
3 predictions, Mike. 1, Roe v. Wade will be overturned. Number 2, the Ohio Right to Life trigger bill will be signed by Governor DeWine. And number 3, it's going to be a red wave election year in November 2022.
All right, Jesse Balmer.
Interesting thing happening in Congress this week. Jim Jordan is subpoenaed by this January 6th committee to come talk to him. He told Fox News that he hasn't even received the subpoena yet, so we'll see what happens there.
Okay, Herb.
Reporters, and not just in Ohio, but in the nation, are beginning to but look at the circumstances of Donald Trump's endorsement of J.D. Vance. They don't believe the face value explanation that the ex-president gave about he's the strongest candidate, and do believe that there's been an arrangement with Peter Thiel to help encourage the ex-president to have made that endorsement. And there's nothing illegal. It doesn't necessarily involve J.D. Vance, but it does, if they come up with something, that does sort of taint the endorsement and indirectly taints J.D. Vance.
Peter Thiel invested at least $15 million.
$15
million in the primary. My off-the-record comment, last week I moderated a panel at the Ohio Chamber of Commerce's Impact Ohio event, and they did a little poll of the folks who were there. I don't know for sure, but it seemed like this crowd leaned a little bit to the right. There was a lot of State House folks there. And they asked them, should marijuana be legalized, recreational marijuana? And 54% of that crowd said it should be legalized. So interesting there. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online. We are on Facebook, and you can catch each one of our episodes on demand. You can watch it whenever you want at our website, WOSU.org. And if you're a WOSU member, a supporter, and you have Passport, you can see Columbus on the Record there as well. For our crew here at WOSU and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.